welcome to Overtime Hockey Talk. My name is Mark Paul. My co-host Justin Baker, joining me post. How many services did you play for at your church? 900 services for Easter. So how many you did?
Yeah, it felt like, but maybe just 5, but still quite a long weekend. I mean, you're there pretty much like 8 hours every day. So
yeah, and they pay you a lot of money to do that, right? Yeah.
I got paid in trail mix and pretzels.
Heaven points.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, yeah. So a good Easter, and now as we, kind of get settled back in here for some hockey after a good hockey weekend too. Actually, there's only 6, maybe 7 games left for some of these teams. I think a few have only 5 games left, so we are right in the thick of it. I mean, we're like 2 weeks left of the regular season, and we're done. I guess it's like 11 days, right? I think the 29th is the last day.
Yeah,
we're here.
Gosh,
and
so pumped.
I know. When I was watching Leafs Islanders, and I was like, obviously the Islanders, they're out of it. I guess it was last night they said, if the Leafs beat the Islanders, they're officially eliminated from the playoffs. I'm like, they're 15 points back with 7 games left. I mean, they have been eliminated for a long time. it's long over. Although I did notice, don't quote me on this, but I think this will be the first time that every single playoff team in a conference all have more than 100 points. Assuming Washington gets 6 of a possible 14 points to close out the year, that will happen. And Boston has to get 3 of a possible 14. Then every team will have 100 points minimum. And Pittsburgh needs 3 out of 10.
That's still crazy, though, to think about it, right? And, I mean, gosh, you could... I remember a few years back, you could literally just look at it and be like, okay, cool. If you get 86 points, you're in, no problem.
Right. Yeah. I mean, now it's like 96 is kind of that. If you get 96, maybe 97, it might be 94 or 5, but it's going to be mid-90s.
Dude, but I think that goes back to like what you've talked about earlier in the show. Like the separation between 4th and 5th place on these teams is just astounding. And especially in the Atlantic, right? We look at it between Boston and Buffalo. I mean, my God, it's a 28-point spread right there, and just absolutely crazy.
Yeah, it's monstrous. By the way, the most points a playoff team ever had and missed the playoffs was 96. So usually, 96. If you get 96 points, other than 3 times in history, you are going to make the playoffs. That happened to 14-15 Bruins, 17-18 Panthers, and 18-19 Canadians. But in general, 96 points is good enough to get you in the playoffs. This year, you're going to need 103.
I was going to say, with the way Vegas and LA are, Nashville, Dallas, that whole race in the West, my goodness, that's you might need 96 points just to squeak in a second wild card spot. I mean,
I guess technically you only need right now 80 points to get into the playoffs in the East, because that's one ahead of the Islanders. Pretty crazy. It just shows. We've talked about it a couple weeks ago that the disparity between playoffs and non-playoffs has grown significantly. I think a lot due to kind of the landscape that COVID and all the shutdowns brought, where some of these bad teams, they were just like, well, no point in spending money. See ya. And and it just and maybe a little bit of it has to do with Seattle, the expansion team coming in. They weren't very good. That certainly you add in an extra team that's losing far more often than they're winning. That's going to tack on some extra points other places. And frankly, it does. There are more games in general being played, right? Like there's 41 more games out there that weren't played before. I think it's 41, or is it just yeah, I guess it's just straight 82.
Yeah, I also think it does have a lot to do with the fact that teams that are rebuilding are sort of embracing it now, right? They're just, I mean, when you look at the Buffaloes, Detroit, Ottawa, right? Those teams in the East that are really they're making strides, but they're not going out. They're not spending crazy amount of money to get themselves over the hump. They're going to take it slow, build their teams through prospects and draft picks, and
and fewer and fewer teams are going, we could keep this together and keep our team going in the play. Because now it's like, well, there's almost no point in taking the risk, because so many teams were losing a lot of money during COVID, so they're like, well, we can recoup by not paying players. And that's
exactly.
kind of is what it is. Well, hey, on today's show, we want to talk about goalies headed into the playoffs. We're going to ignore all those goalie tandems that are far outside the playoffs. So that's all playoff teams currently, plus we'll include Vegas because they are certainly still in the race. I still think it's unlikely that they make it, but they're still there. They have been on a tear, so that helps. But one misstep, they lost to the Oilers the other night 4-0, and it's those missteps that can really hurt you in the end. But we'll include Vegas because they are still relevant in the playoff picture for sure. But we wanted to talk about goalie tandems headed into the playoffs, and what brought this on was watching Frederik Andersen go down last week, which we do know now that he had an MRI. It came back negative, which seemingly just means, hey, he didn't tear anything. But, of course, he's still hurt. In a week, they're going to reevaluate and, quote, see where he's at, according to head coach Rod Brindamore. So that is, I guess, encouraging on one hand. You hope that he can be back for the playoffs. I mean, I just feel for the guy. He always seems to get hurt at the worst possible time, and it generally is coming right into playoff time. I wonder how much road he's got left in the NHL if he just, it just doesn't seem like his body cooperates with him very often. But with that said, we thought, we should go through these goalie tandems because it is not a crazy scenario for your head goalie, your top goalie to go down. Who's in the best position to go on a long playoff run if their goaltender goes down? And so then what better way to evaluate that than to evaluate tandems headed into the playoffs? So Justin, with that said, I guess we're just going 17-1. And just so you know, we are including goalies that are hurt like an Anderson, but not goalies that are maybe out for the season. So any goaltender that isn't going to play the rest of the year, which I believe Dallas is the only one with a goalie kind of out for the year. Is Braden Holtby, is he still kind of being said and he's done for the year?
It almost feels
I feel like
that.
It kind of changes, but it doesn't seem like he's going to play again.
The masterful Scott Wedgwood is all I'm looking at right now.
Dude, he's been rolling anyways. Okay, so let's start at number 17. Who do you have?
Yeah, the pitiful Washington Capitals, and I say pitiful.
Yes.
Their offense is clicking right now, but this goaltending is just quite pitiful. I could pick apart this one for days, but to be quite honest, I mean, listen, there's a reason why you and I talked about it at the deadline, how they needed to go pick up a goaltender. Marc-Andre Fleury's name was floated around, but obviously he doesn't want to go there for good reason. And their best goalie, Vanacek, a .909 save percentage right now through 39 games. They've basically been virtually split down the middle, and no one seems to want to take the starter's role.
Yeah, and some of it I think is also they do have a rather porous team defense. I think they were able to get away with it for a long time because their high-end players were so high-end, and they still are in a goal-scoring capacity, but
Sure.
They don't quite have those defensive juggernauts and the speed. It's the speed, like the overall team speed that maybe some other teams do. I mean, just watching them play the Leafs, it was like they had no answer for the Leafs' speed. And I think as long as Washington is going up against another team with a lot of speed, which frankly is probably every other team in the Eastern Conference, maybe barring like maybe the Rangers, maybe Pittsburgh, you could say are a little bit slower, but that's not who they're going to take on in the first round. Florida or Carolina, whichever one it ends up being. I mean, I don't think that they're going to match up well because of that. But that's why I think even though their goalies to me they're not great anyways, but their goalies are worsened by the speed in front of them.
Yep.
I have them at number 17 as well.
Beautiful.
Absolutely at the bottom of the barrel there. Who do you have at 16?
Yeah, at 16, I got two goaltenders with basically the same stats as the Washington Capitals, right? And that's the LA Kings, Jonathan Quick and Peterson. Again, same situation, almost splitting time evenly, 42 and 36 games played. Quick leading the way with a .907 save percentage. But to me, the difference and why I give them a slight nudge over Washington is obviously the pedigree with Jonathan Quick. having won those Stanley Cups, and he can, essentially, obviously not the same guy he once was, but, maybe he finds a little bit of that little playoff magic if they happen to squeak in and not, fall to Vegas here, catching up on their heels right now. So, and then, when you mentioned too, you talk about speed in front of them. Yes, they do have a much better or a more speedy offense in front of them. And, maybe Drew Doughty comes back for the playoffs. I'm not really sure what his injury situation is like. I haven't recently looked at it, but
doesn't look like it.
Right. Right. But they've had some guys step in that have filled the shoes pretty well. And I think they play a much better team defensive structure under Todd McClellan. So for me at number 16, it's the LA Kings.
Okay, at number 16 for me. So the Kings are 15, so we're not far off there.
Okay.
I think that in general their goaltending tandem. Cal Peterson is the goalie of the future there, but yeah, it's just as they just don't match up super well with a lot of other teams, other than maybe the team that I have at number 16, and that's the Edmonton Oilers. So fortunately for them, I've got the Oilers, who they will likely could play in the first round. That's who I have as my number 16. I don't like either Koskinen or Mike Smith. Both guys can get on a run. Anyone can get on a run. That's the thing, is that, Washington, they might have the worst goaltending tandem. They could go and rattle off a 9.30 save percentage in the first round and have a hell of a first round. And any NHL goaltender can have a great little 5-game stretch, 6-game stretch. But when I look at it over the totality of the season, and it's like Mike Smith is like, who are you going to get? You have no idea. Koskinen, who are you going to get? You don't know. You truly don't know. Now, 8-1-1 in their last 10, things are going really well right now. We've seen this. We've seen this play before, though.
I'll give you that, and that's why I have Edmonton at 15. So
okay, all right, yeah, we're not too far away from that then. I have. So like I said, I had L.A. 15, Edmonton 16. So you've got Edmonton 16. We just have them flipped.
Yeah, I've got Edmonton at number 15, and so to me, I was watching Mike Smith over this past weekend and what he did to Vegas, back-to-back shutouts there, and obviously named the third star of the week for the NHL here. And to me, I'll give him a slight nudge just because I think again, he's playing a little bit better than LA, either one of LA's goaltenders right now, and whether or not he continues that success or whether or not he actually stays healthy is a whole nother issue. So, but like all these goaltenders at the bottom of the list too, they could just go on a real crapper really, really fast.
Right,
so.
right. Okay, so who do you have at 14?
At 14, I have the Dallas Stars. Again, you mentioned it, right? They pretty much are down to Ottinger and Wedgwood, and so for me, that can be a little concerning. I mean, yes, maybe you could call it Khudobin and have him step in for the playoffs. I mean, after he went on that hot run with them a couple years back, but this is Ottinger's net really, and Wedgwood might be the hot hand right now and the guy who's looking pretty good. I mean, .917 save percentage through 5 games, but for me, it's going to be Jake Ottinger's net. He's the future for this team, and not a lot of playoff experience for him. I just don't have a lot of faith in his ability after watching this season. And this is a team that offensively goes through Jake Robertson and that first line with Joe Pavelski. And so if they struggle offensively, depth-wise, to score, and they got to rely on goaltending, I don't know how comfortable I feel if I'm Dallas to ride Jake Ottinger into the finals, but we shall see.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Dallas is getting that far anyway, so I'm not worried about that. So 14, I've got Vegas. Vegas is my 14. And I'll tell you why. First off, I kind of go, well, if they get, they very well might knock the Kings out and make the playoffs. There's always that possibility. But Robin Lehner, he's played okay this year. Hasn't been great. Do I want Logan Thompson or Laurent Brossoit heading into the playoffs? Logan Thompson he's got great numbers this year in a very limited amount of games. He started 13 games, but he's played well. He's played pretty well to date. winning his 4 out of the last 5, and in those games he played great. He's a shutout in those games. So Logan Thompson kind of, finding his way there in the Vegas organization. There has not been a whole lot of goaltending depth beyond a Vegas starter, outside of, hey, we go trade for Robin Lehner for a minute there when the two of him and Marc-Andre Fleury were there together. But Logan Thompson proving that he can get the job done. However, headed into the playoffs, if Lehner isn't completely healthy, then I really hate their goaltending tandem. Then they probably fall really far back. But as long as Lehner's healthy, then things should be okay. Which he's been healthy in April here, so things should be okay. But I worry about them. I have them so low. I just don't like how Lehner's playing, and the rest of it is a giant question mark. So that's why I have them a lot lower. And then I have Dallas at 13. So I think between this is my thought with Dallas, Ottinger, Wedgwood. Before this year, neither one were looking like world beaters. Now both of them kind of looking like, wow, this is a great duo, great tandem. Whoever's in net for Dallas right now is playing really well. I think a lot of that has to do with the system that they're playing. So I'm in some respects I'm less worried about their goaltending tandem because I don't think that it's as important as it is for some other teams because of how defensively minded Dallas is.
Sure. No, I get that, right? And obviously team defense plays a big part of it. I mean, you look at a team like Calgary and maybe chalk up some extra numbers to Markstrom just for that. Yeah. But at the same time, maybe, he's really stealing the show. So for me at 13, I don't have Vegas, and I'm not flip-flopping with you again with this one, but I have your hometown team, the Toronto Maple Leafs, at 13.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah, not to rain on your parade or anything, but when I look at goaltenders who have played 5 or more games throughout the totality of the year, right, and I look at goals saved above expected, Jack Campbell's at a negative 4.1. And
isn't it crazy that he was a positive and was in like the Vezina Trophy, and now it's come down. That's how badly he's played. How badly he played in like January, February, and even into March.
Yes, Peter Marazzic at a negative 11.6. Now, again, I'm kind of throwing Cauldron out the window right here in a limited sample size. Because to me, he's not a guy who's going to go into the playoffs as your starter, anyways, barring injury, of course. Assuming it's Marazzic and Campbell and net come the playoff time. Again, Marazic's a guy who, watched in Carolina and watched a little bit in Detroit, and I think he is capable of still being a very good goaltender in the playoffs. And Jack Campbell can be that too. They've shown definitely in stretches, Jack Campbell a lot more than Peter Marazzic, obviously, this year. But, they've shown that they can really go out and steal some games. And so, I think for a Toronto team, if you get above average goaltending with Jack Campbell, you're in okay shape because this team can really dig in and score some goals. I feel like, especially with that forward group there, I would feel okay with Jack Campbell and net. But to me, I look at the teams ahead of them and I say, okay, would I want their number one above Toronto's number one? And my answer for all these teams ahead of them on the list would be yes at this point. So
okay, that's fair. That is a good way to evaluate it. I have them a little bit higher, but not okay. Terribly higher. Sorry, so the Leafs were 13 for you?
Yep.
Was that 13? Okay. Who do you have at 12?
So at 12, I got the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Wow, we've got a big difference there with the Penguins, to be honest.
Yeah. So for me lately, I mean, Tristan Jarry, right? He's injured right now. He'll obviously be back at some point here. And so right now it's Casey DeSmith's net. But Casey DeSmith as a backup, I'm just not a huge fan of his. I don't think he's a very good goaltender. He's a little below average in my opinion. Like you talked about Vegas earlier, I would take Logan Thomas all day over Casey DeSmith at this point. Now, again, Logan Thomas's sample size is a lot smaller than Casey DeSmith's, but Tristan Jarry to me is a guy who lately has not been very good. He started out the season very hot, really good, but he's been cold as of late. And then when you look at his playoff numbers, they're just atrocious.
Well, because he has one playoff series and he played very badly.
Yes. So, again, if you get the Tristan Jarry that started the year off very good, right, you're in good shape for the Pittsburgh Penguins. But for me, if I have to look at the season as a whole, maybe I'm a little bit more hesitant. I mean, I love looking at the advanced stats, and his goals saved above expected are number 11 in the league at 12.8. And so, again, good numbers, right? But again, I think, his start to the season had a lot to do with that, because we heard his name thrown around a lot for Vezina to start the season. And obviously he hasn't played great of late. And so maybe when he comes back, if he's 100% healthy, I don't know what Tristan Jarry we're going to get. So to me, as a Penguins fan, that would worry me a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, I've got Boston actually at number 12.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, my reason being, first off, you're walking in with a couple of guys with very little playoff experience, or, as some would like to say, none. Jeremy Swayman has kind of been jerked around a little bit, of course, with the Tuukka Rask stuff, and Linus Ullmark was signed to that big deal. It's not that I don't dislike their tandem. Just thinking about the playoffs, I am less worried about Jack Campbell come playoff time than I would be Jeremy Swayman.
Oh, okay.
To be honest, if I were thinking, all right, who might have a few bad games, I don't think that Jack Campbell's the one that I'm worried about. It would be Jeremy Swayman, who has, you look at the little stretch that he went on, Detroit, St. Louis, Ottawa, didn't play great in any of those 3 games. And, obviously there's a lot goes into each game. Not every game is a goalie's fault, even if he does let in 4 goals in a game. But I just you don't know what you're going to get from a guy who's never played in the playoffs. And I think that's an important factor when considering, all right, how comfortable am I with this tandem? Well, you look at the Leafs. Let's say Marazzic is healthy. They've got 2 goalies who have played in playoff series before. So you've already got that experience, and Marazzic has won playoff series before. So that just helps towards a whole team mindset, I think. And so when you have 2 goalies, Ullmark coming from the Sabres, he definitely was never in the playoffs, and Jeremy Swayman, it's just an unknown. So I think that's a factor that has played into my list here. Where I've got Dallas. There's a couple of goalies who have not really sniffed the playoffs. So it's certainly a concern, which is also why I have the Colorado Avalanche at number 11. Because I do get concerned with, hey, they put so much into Philip Grubauer. Grubauer had the ups and the downs in the playoffs, and then he leaves. Well, now you're going with, I'm assuming, Darcy Kemper come playoff time, and Darcy Kemper hasn't had a whole lot of sniff at the playoffs, right? He's been to the playoffs. Really, he went on one run with Arizona in 1920, and other than
1920,
2019-20, he had one other series where he was the goaltender the whole time with Minnesota in 13-14, but beyond him, I'm very concerned. If he goes down, he's an older goaltender. It could pose an issue, and he's had some injury stuff in the past. So, and it has taken him a while to really get feeling good here with the Colorado Avalanche. So, I, for whatever reason, just don't love Colorado's goaltending. So I have them at number 11.
Okay. Yeah. I get it. Sometimes you just gotta, right? It's an eye test. It's just a gut feeling, right? So you just got to go with your gut.
Yep. Now, do I think that that's going to stop them? No.
Right.
They're too good. They're too good. It's not going to stop them early on.
Okay. Well, at number 12 for me was Pittsburgh. At 11, I have the Vegas Knights. Again, I like Robin Lehner's game when he's healthy. That's the problem, right? Just being healthy. So when you look at the advanced statistics on him, he's doing a good job. Sitting at number 16, 6 goals, saved above expected. So if you get Robin Lehner 100% healthy, I still think he's capable, and especially the type of forward group he has in front of him now, I'm anxious to see what they can do. Healthy again too in the playoffs.
Yeah, Vegas is far more concerned about the log jam with the cap than you are with anything else. So if they make the playoffs, goaltending is one of the least of your concern because of all these new guys coming back. Who did you have at 10?
At 10, I've got a team you talked about, the Boston Bruins.
Okay, yeah.
Again, I've seen some other lists out there, or some other people that have put this tandem a little bit higher. But for me, again, I kind of go back to you when you mentioned their lack of playoff experience. But again, I think there's great leadership in this dressing room, between Bergeron and Marchand. I think there's little to worry about. I think regardless who's in net there, I think they'll be okay. Now, again, do I have a ton of confidence in this, this tandem to go ahead and steal a series? No, but I think they'll play good enough to get them,
I don't think their goaltending is necessarily what's going to cause them to lose a series. It's just that they're going to be the team that they're going to play in the first round, likely the Carolina Hurricanes, maybe the Leafs. But I think no matter who they play in the first round, that team has far more offensive depth. And that is probably what's going to hurt the Bruins. I think the Bruins going into next year, if they can get Bergeron back for another year and they can kind of tinker around with things, I think you might see a better team one last shot at it. But this year, I just don't think that they have the depth, which is probably exactly what they want. Everyone to write them off, and then that's when they'll do something crazy.
Yep.
At number 10, I have the Leafs. We've talked a lot about the Leafs. They've got enough playoff experience to where I bump them a little bit, and I look at how Campbell played earlier in the year. If he can bottle some of that up, they'll be in much, much better shape. At number, I'll go 9, 8, 7. I've got the Carolina Hurricanes at 9, the Nashville Predators at 8, and I actually have the Pittsburgh Penguins at 7. I'll tell you why I have the Penguins ahead. Now, first off, Carolina, I am concerned a little bit about Frederik Andersen and Antti Ranta. My concern is that they can't stay healthy, but I'm at the same time, Carolina isn't necessarily going to win because they have amazing goaltending. I think they have great goaltending because they're such a good team in front of them that you can put a lot of guys in net for the Hurricanes and they're going to play well. I.e., you look at Nedeljkovic and Frederik Andersen, Antti Ranta, Peter Marazzic, like all these guys that have come through here in the last 24 months who have played spectacular for the Carolina Hurricanes. It's not because of their goaltending. It's because the team is fantastic in front of them. They play a very high-speed game, and they have so much depth at defense, and they play a great team defense game. So Carolina, I put their goaltending a little lower, but to me it doesn't really matter.
Fair.
Who do you have at 9, 8, 7?
Okay, so at number 9, I've got the Florida Panthers. Number 8, I've got Nashville. And 7, I have Calgary.
Okay. Wow, we're going to have a real different list.
Yeah, so I put Florida at number 9 because, again, Bobrovsky, he had that one series-stealing, performance and when he was in Columbus against the Tampa Bay Lightning. But other than that, he hasn't done much. And this year seems to be a year where he's maybe found it. He's got it together. Of course, his backup there, Mr. Knight.
Doesn't hurt that his team is unbelievable.
Right. Yeah.
Their fourth line is a lot of teams' second line. So
exactly. So if we're talking teams in general, right, Florida would be at the top of the list. But talking goaltenders here, right, if I have to go Spencer Knight, I'm not so confident. He's been up and down all year. So that is a little bit concerning for me. Now, with Nashville at number 8, I love UC Saros. He's probably going to be up there as far as Vezina candidates are concerned. He's done, him and Roman Josi have, in my mind, have been the best, defenseman goaltender tandem to carry their team. I mean, I don't know any other team that, is getting that kind of, pull from their back end that Nashville's gotten. Granted, Matt Duchene's picked it up and they've got other guys producing up front, but those two guys have certainly helped carry the team, maybe more than some other teams here. But if I have to go to, David Rittich, outside of Saros, you're in a lot of trouble. Yeah. I have next to nil confidence in that guy. So that's why maybe Nashville falls a little bit on my list just because of their backup situation.
Exactly.
And similar with number 7, Calgary. Again, Dan Vladar back there. He had a couple little flashes of, could he be a good goaltender here in the NHL in Boston? But of course, Boston saw the writing on the wall and they let him go, and he goes to Calgary, and with good reason. I don't think he's an okay backup goaltender. I think that's all he's ever going to be. Now, Jacob Markstrom and this system that they have is phenomenal. Markstrom definitely has stolen some games for them this year, and he's played phenomenal. But again, Vladar coming in there, you figure with that tight defensive system that Calgary runs, that his numbers would be better, and they're frankly they're not for me. And so that's why that's a little bit of a concern too, and I give them a little bit of a knock and maybe put them a little bit lower on the list than maybe where you had them.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I have Calgary at 6, so we're close enough. Not too far apart, but yeah, Calgary at 6 for me. I mean, Markstrom is fantastic. Again, such good team defense, and considering in the playoffs that everything tightens up even more, I think that Dan Vladar would actually be pretty well protected. But yeah, I've got Calgary at 6. I just accidentally changed my whole list by clicking a button. I don't know what I just did.
Control Z.
Yep, that's exactly what I did. What in the world? Who was your number 6?
Yeah, so number 6 for me, if you want to go 6-5-4, right?
Yeah, let's do 6.
At number 6, I've got St. Louis. UC.
Ville.
Husso's been great. Yeah, Ville Husso's been great as a starter this year, and I think that he's probably going to be the guy going into the playoffs this year, it looks like. But while I give them, earlier on in the year, or like our trade deadline, disappointing players that need to get going, right? We talked about that post-trade deadline. Jordan Binghamton was on my list. I think he looks like he's maybe starting to get it back together. And the reason I have St. Louis a little bit higher than some teams here is because he has that Stanley Cup pedigree. Right. He's won it. He knows what it takes.
You're not afraid if he has to, if Husso shits the bed, it's fine.
Exactly.
You've got someone else in there.
You can come in with this guy and you do not worry at all.
Right.
At number 5, I've got Colorado just because of the reasons you mentioned earlier. Not a ton of playoff experience. Darcy Kemper, is he going to stay healthy? But if he does stay healthy, I think he is a phenomenal goaltender and can certainly handle, what Colorado's going to go through to make a deep run here. And then at number 4, I've got Carolina. So for me, again, Freddie Anderson's health is a concern, but they've got one of the better backups in the league if you're looking at a tandem 1A, 1B situation. Either one of those guys are great when healthy, but again, that's the key, when healthy.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I have St. Louis at 5, so we're right there with each other, and I've got the New York Rangers at 4.
Okay.
Now we're just kind of we're moving into elite company, anyways. Really, you could probably swap all of my top 4 around, and I would have no issue with it. Rangers, I have at number 4. I really do wonder. Now, we have seen outside of like the last month has kind of changed things a little bit, but I mean, for the first 4 months of the season, Shesterkin was like a Hart Trophy candidate. Now he's slowed down here a little bit towards the end, and I think that everyone loves offense over giving something like this to a goaltender. I really think that Austin Matthews is still, as long as if he scores 60 and keeps kind of chugging here at the end a little bit. If this injury can, get healed up quick, I think he's probably the favorite for the Hart. But I mean, Shesterkin's probably still in the top 5 of voting for the Hart. But I do wonder, come playoff time, sometimes that he hasn't had that kind of experience, and so you wonder, come playoff time, is it the same? Do you get the same goalie? Do we get the goalie from the first 6 months, 5 months of the season? Or do we get this goalie who's quite tired? He's played more games by far than he ever has in his career. Is it kind of catching up to him this season where, he's going to maybe not have the greatest playoff performance, and we'll kind of, we see that he's not a rookie, but we'll see that young player kind of like, you kind of have to shed those, have a rough run, or maybe not your greatest run to go, oh, I know what I need to do now in the regular season to kind of prep myself for the playoffs. Much like, hey, what we saw with the team that I have at number 3, the Tampa Bay Lightning, and Vasilevsky having to go through some growing pains in the playoffs before he became the ultimate goaltender in the NHL right now. I have Tampa Bay at 3 because I I just don't like their backup goaltending, but I don't really think that Vasilevsky can get hurt. I don't think he gets hurt. So I'm really not worried about it.
Yeah, right. You mentioned it. If Vasilevsky was down there in trouble. So for me, I've got Tampa Bay at number 3 on my list. If he gets in trouble, they're in trouble because there's no way I want Brian Elliott come in. And I mean, granted, yes, he's actually got some pretty decent numbers this season, a .915 save percentage.
They re-signed him too.
Yeah, 3.1 goals saved above expected. I mean, there's a reason he got re-signed in Philadelphia, right? His numbers weren't that great in Philly, but he is a great backup goaltender. He's a great mentor, a great guy to come in, veteran guy that you want in your locker room, and he shows up. He still knows how to play, and he still plays pretty well. I mean, that's why a guy like Craig Anderson, for example, is still getting shots in this league because he's a good veteran. He knows what to do, and he's a good team player.
Yeah, people
especially
like
at that age.
People like him. Who do you have at number 3?
So number 3 was Tampa Bay.
Okay, so you got Tampa. Okay, now who's your 2?
Number 2, I've got the New York Rangers.
Okay, yeah. So
obviously, Shesterkin's been all world this season. 32.3 goals saved above
unbelievable.
average.
He's at 41.
Oh, is it now?
Yeah. Shesterkin's at 41.89 goals saved above average.
Money Puck has failed me.
I'm just looking at Hockey Reference, so maybe they use a different formula or something like that.
Yeah, maybe. But regardless, he's still number 1 on everybody's list for a reason.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So he's the guy, right? And I think right now, if I had to pick one guy to go into a playoff series with, that would be the guy I think that I would most expect to steal a series, right? If I needed one guy to steal me a series, he would be the guy I think I would go to right now at this point in the season. Now, again, if taking in, previous experience, stuff like that, then I might go to somebody else, but especially maybe the guy at number 1 here. But for me, New York's number 2.
There are very few goaltenders who have a coming out party and then go right into the playoffs and just keep on rolling. It doesn't happen. Now, it did happen to Jordan Binnington, so it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility. But in my mind, usually come playoff time, that's when all of a sudden everyone's keying in on every little thing, and you kind of can start to point out a little bit of weaknesses, and we'll see what happens in the playoffs. I mean, I don't think that he's going to be the reason they lose any series if they lose.
No, I think it's great that he hasn't played 60 or 70 games like every other goaltender. Yeah, probably the one reason he's not going to get, probably going to get the Hart Trophy. But, again, I think right now this is his coming out party. And I think next year, again, we're going to see the year of the Russians next year with Sorokin, being the goaltender, in my opinion, that's going to have the breakout season next year.
Yeah, we'll see how that comes into play come playoff. It'll be interesting to watch which goalies who have played more games, who it has an effect on. Because, hey, like a Jack Campbell, even a Bobrovsky who's played less than 50 games thus far. I mean, you've got some big names. Swayman's only played 37. Does that actually help him come playoff time? There's Jack Campbell's only played in 46. There maybe, Saros, who's played in 64, Markstrom played in 60, Jarry's played in 58. He'll be probably over 60 by the end of the year. I wonder how much that will play a factor. So that's a good thing to keep an eye on. I've got Florida at 2, and my number 1, I think we're the same. Minnesota.
We're the same. Yeah, Minnesota. Did not plan that.
Yeah, Florida number 1 or number 2. Sorry, I love what the potential of Bobrovsky here, and the team in front of him is just spectacular. So they've won 10 in a row. That's they're almost a plus 100 goals for the season. Somehow they just keep on destroying everyone they play.
It's crazy because, I mean, you look at Toronto, right? They've gone 8-1-1 in their last 10, but they just can't make up any ground on Florida. Because they're playing so good.
It's insane. I mean, Florida has scored almost 100 goals more than the Boston Bruins.
Dude, same with Colorado
and only let in 15 more.
Right. I mean, Colorado, St. Louis, both on 9-game winners right now, and they just can't make up any ground on each other. But Minnesota, number 1. I mean, Marc-Andre Fleury, what can I say after that trade? I mean, it just bumped him right up there. And of course.
Yeah, and Cam Talbot has just been playing out. He was playing really well, and then they traded for a better goalie, and now he still might be the number 1. He's played that well.
This could be an actual situation where a team might legitimately go in and just rotate goalies
in the playoffs
and see what happens. Yeah.
Yeah. Why not? You've done it all year. Why change? There's no rule book that says you can't. That would be pretty cool.
It would be, yeah. We talked about guys playing a lot, maybe fatigue setting in. This could be a situation where the coach is like, nope, I don't want to worry about fatigue. Let's rotate.
I love it. All right. Well, we will see very shortly in like 12 days the playoffs will begin, or 13. I don't know what day the playoffs start, but I'm sure I can do a quick Google here and it'll tell me. March 29th is when the playoffs start. No, that's not right. It already happened.
Maybe April 29th. No, I think
the regular season ends. Oh, Monday, May 2nd.
There you go.
Google was no help. It said, when did the playoffs start? And it didn't tell me. I had to scroll down to like the 6th thing. That's crazy. The heck, Google. Asshole. Making me look like an asshole. All right. Well, that's our show. You can find us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. Justin, have a good rest of your night. I will as well. And to our listeners, thanks for being here, and we will talk to you very soon. have his debut tonight against the Flyers, or if it'll be here in the near future. But I think that type of player is very important for the Leafs because they need to be able to give Simmons, give Spezza some time to just kind of gear up for the playoffs. I think you've seen it. Wayne Simmons, this is probably his last year. My guess is he retires after this year, to be honest. He's played quite bad. He's getting healthy scratched all the time.
He's just slow.
He's slow. Yep.
Yeah.
And unless something really changes, unless he really goes to work, loses weight, and is able to get some of that speed back. Even his hands just don't look as good. Spezza's hands are still there. I think with Spezza, it's just a matter of just give him a little time off and have him, don't have him play every night. In my opinion, that's what I would do. But he might tell you he wants to play every night, and I say too bad. But yeah, I think Jack Campbell he's the key. He's the key to it all. Who's your number 2?
My number 2 is the guy you mentioned earlier, and I promised we would wait to talk about, and that is Alex Lafreniere.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow. Second most important player coming into the playoffs.
I absolutely think so because, again, we talked about it to start this list off, how important third lines are going to be to team successes. And listen, the Rangers got lucky, and I shouldn't say get lucky. I think they traded wisely because, to me, this was a guy who I thought was going to be an under-the-radar type of move, just like a Max Domi, but he seems to have paid off even better at this point when they acquired Andrew Kopp, right? Ryan Strom's gone down with injury for the last couple of games, and Kopp has stepped in just phenomenally, but it gives you flexibility, right? Frank Vetrano is another acquisition they made who has turned out extremely well, and now you're able to put him on the right wing where he actually is suited for to score some goals, and it gives you the opportunity to move Alexis down to your third line, right? You can put him on his left wing where he's most comfortable, where he's a natural player at, and you give him that opportunity to really go out there and score some goals. But the reason I put him a little bit higher on this list is just because, I look at his production that he's had through the course of the season. In, 67 games, he's played with phenomenal players, like you mentioned, Chris Kreider, only 25 points and 15 goals to go for it. I need more out of this guy. I think especially if this team's going to be, and granted, all 15 of those goals are even strength goals too, so he sees no power play time at all. I think if this team wants to have long-term success in the playoffs, they need a third line that can contribute, and that's one of the reasons they brought in Gaudreau, right? So he can be that third line guy he was in Tampa, and Philip Scheidel is going to be Philip Scheidel. He's going to bring you good third line production. And so Lafreniere's got to step it up and be that go-to guy on the third line.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously I have him on my list. Part of me feels as though he's so overrated because of where he was taken in the draft and that really he's probably ends up being no more than a nice second line winger. We'll see how he actually pans out. But at the same time, the playoffs are that time where a young guy, it's a fresh season kind of deal, and some of these young players, they go, oh, I get it. And then they have the playoff of their life. And then the rest of their career kind of takes off from there. So I do, maybe that's Alex Lafreniere. I hope for his sake, I hope that it is. Unless he's playing the Leafs, then I hope that it doesn't happen.
Right, and you look at, again, Capo Caco's been out with injury, and I know there's been talks, again, with one of these two guys possibly getting moved. It was at the deadline. They were thinking about moving one of those guys, and I think if you're going to seize an opportunity to say, hey, you know what, this is why you should keep me, and maybe, especially, again, this is a big what if management's thinking this. If Chris Drury's up there thinking, okay, I need to move one of these guys and bring in another piece, say we don't go far in the playoffs, this is your opportunity to give him a reason to keep you. Yep,
100%. Okay, on to the number 1. Who do you have?
So I've got a tandem, and you've already talked about them, but for me, I don't think there's any other tandem that's going to equate. Yeah, the Edmonton Oilers goaltending is going to be so listen, they've just got to be better, right? If Edmonton wants to go deep, especially if you end up in a series where you face another Winnipeg that shuts down McDavid and Draisaitl, right? I mean, Evander Kane was brought in to help kind of alleviate that, so you don't have to pair those two superstars together, and you hope to spread out the offense. But if for some reason offensively they get stymied and they just can't produce, you've got to have good goaltending back there, right? The goaltending's got to bail you out. And right now, I would not look back at that goaltending and say, okay, they're capable of bailing them out.
Right. And what I'll say is that while your number one tandem, you're asking them kind of to do something that either they have never done or, in Mike Smith's case, has not really done in a long time.
Right.
So it's almost like it's like grasping at straws for the Oilers, right? Like, and I think a lot of people recognize that hey, you can tell these guys to step it up all you want, but they're incapable. It's just some people you can try as hard as you want, and Nick Foligno is not going to be Connor McDavid, just like the Oilers goaltending is not going to be good. Like, I'm sorry, that's just. I don't see it happen. Now, does it mean that they can't be good for a game? No. They'll have like nice little flashes in the pan, and maybe that's enough to get them through the first round. Beating an LA. Do I think they have what it takes to beat LA? Yeah, probably. Can they beat Calgary in their present situation? No. I mean, Calgary's goaltending, their defense, their depth far exceeds anything the Oilers have. The only thing the Oilers have is McDavid and Draisaitl. Let's face it, that's it. And Evander Kane helps, but everything else has just kind of been what it is. It isn't much different than what we've seen in the past. My number one is a little more like you've done it before, and we've seen it this season, but we need to see it from a huge, crazy extent. You need to go on your hottest run you've ever had, and that's Connor Hellebuyck. If the Winnipeg Jets are going to make the playoffs, Connor Hellebuyck, who, frankly, I mean, he's playing really well. He's won 4 of his last 5 games, and granted, 2 of those games, 2 of those 5, one of the win, the one loss, he allowed 4 goals, but he got a shutout and allowed 1 and 2 goals in the other ones. He's been playing well the last 5 games. And he's won 7 of 9. So it's not as if 6 of 9. So, or 6 of 8. Oh my gosh. It's there. Connor Hellebuyck has it in him. And if the Winnipeg Jets are to make the playoffs, I mean, there's no other team that has a player like Connor Hellebuyck who you could say, honest to God, that guy could, these last 13 games of the season, they could win 11 of them because of Connor Hellebuyck. It's a stretch, sure, but if they are going to make the playoffs, he is the most important player in the league right now for any team to make the playoffs, especially with where they sit on the outside looking in. They've got 1 game in hand on Vegas, and Dallas has 3 games in hand on them. They're 4 points back. Like, there's the math is against them. But I think if they were to win 10 of their last 13 games, that would put them at 96 points. 96, is that enough to get them in? I don't know. That might, and we might be seeing in the West 100 points is what you need to get into the playoffs.
Ooh.
Or pretty close, maybe 98. But anyways, 10 wins out of their last 13 games would put them at 96 points, which in general has gotten you into the playoffs. Can Connor Hellebuyck help this team go 10-3 in their last 13 games? He'd be the one that has to do it.
Yeah, the one thing I will say for Winnipeg, right, and maybe why I didn't put Connor Hellebuyck or anybody really from Winnipeg on my list, is the fact that I think as a team collectively, everybody needs to play at their best, right? Because they are so far out of the playoffs right now in terms of, remaining games and the points there. They're behind Dallas and Vegas right now. Sure. They really need everybody to play at their most elite levels that they've had, right? I mean, if there's any time to be in playoff mode, it is right now, right? You want guys stepping up. You want your Scheifele's, your Blake Wheelers. You want those guys playing at a point per game production. And you need Hellebuyck stepping up with like 925 save percentages every single night at least. So
I'm thinking like 9.4, 9.5.
It might be needed, right? Because again, the hole they've dug themselves into early in the season, and lately it looks like these guys have been kind of doing that. They've been stepping up, and where you kind of hope they would have been at the beginning of the year. And look, to me, I don't disagree with you. I think that's a well-chosen number one and a guy that I won't argue with on anybody's list. But
he's your boy.
I still think he's, a quality top 10 goaltender. But I just think, again, as a team and as a whole, I think there's just so many players on this team I could pick. And maybe that's why I had a hard time putting them on my list. But, again, not going to fault you for doing it. Well,
thank you. All right. Well, that's our, top 10 players that need to pick it up. There you go. We will be back soon. You can find us on Twitter at OT Hockey Talk. Until then, Justin, have a good rest of your weekend, and to our listeners, enjoy all the hockey. We'll talk to you later.